Welcome to Women in the Nude, where we expose everything except for our bodies. We'll leave that to your imagination. So here I am in a hotel room again. And coming off our last episode, I had a lot of questions about motherhood. And I love those questions. And I feel like I haven't really done an episode where I talk about motherhood. And I think right now I can speak on behalf of a lot of moms where there's a lot of emotions going on. The world is very uncertain. We're raising kids in a world that is different from how we grew up in, and what does that look like? And I have some thoughts, and I want to hear from you after this episode. I asked some questions that'll be coming up, and I want to know your answers. I'm asking those same questions for myself. And even if you are not a mom, there's a lot in here for you. And, I care about what you think. We're growing together. So give this a listen, and we'll see how we go. I wrote it down because I want to make sure that I get all my thoughts out there. It's a little different when I'm doing a solo episode versus speaking with someone. And this is just me, so I want to get it out correctly. Here we go. So I kind of just thought of, I kind of just wrote down a feeling of when I look at Hendricks. And so, Hendricks is 5. And so often I feel this overwhelming rush of love, obviously, but underneath it, there's something else. And I think the easiest way for me to describe it is fear, which I know a lot of us feel. I'll be watching him play and he's just completely free. He's like, unaware in the best way. He's unaware of headlines and politics and division and violence and economic uncertainty, all of it. And he's just building Legos or asking me a question about airplanes or laughing about something that makes absolutely no sense. And I have this instinct to freeze him, to keep him right there because he's innocent, he's unburdened. But as the world moves on, and as we know very well, the world does not freeze. And motherhood is, in uncertain times, it feels like we're living in that tension between wanting to protect innocence and knowing that we're raising children in a world that feels anything but innocent. And there's this strange duality, I feel, constantly. On one hand, I am deeply grateful. My child is safe. He is loved, he is fed, he is warm, he's protected. And then on the other hand, I scroll past stories of mothers who don't get that same peace. Mothers who don't get to turn off the news. Maybe they're on the news. Mothers who are navigating displacement of all kinds. Mothers who are afraid of their children, afraid for their children in ways that I can't fully comprehend. And sometimes I'm making my son a peanut butter sandwich while reading about something devastating on the news happening somewhere else. And it's a feeling that is hard to describe. And those two realities can exist at the same time. It's peace and it's heartbreak. It's joy in my kitchen and grief on my screen. And those things are true and they're happening at once. And motherhood has made me feel that more deeply than anything else ever has. And I think one of the biggest questions I sit with right now is, what is actually my job as a mother in this moment in history? Is it to protect his innocence for as long as possible? Or is it to prepare him gently for a world that can be complicated, unfair, and cruel? Is it both? And how do we raise kind children without raising naive ones? How do we raise strong boys without raising hardened men? How do we teach empathy in a time when so much of the world feels polarized? Especially for me raising a son as a mom, I feel that responsibility in a very specific way. And I think a lot about really just what kind of man he'll become. Will he know how to express emotion? Will he understand consent as second nature, not as a lecture he hears once in high school, but as something that's embedded in how he moves through the world? Will he see women as whole beings, not as categories or stereotypes or something to conquer or impress, but as equals? Will he know how to listen to a woman without needing to correct her? Will he know how to sit with discomfort if a woman tells him that he's wrong? And that matters to me deeply, because respecting women doesn't start when boys start dating. It has already started years ago now, even though he's only 5, because it starts when he sees how his dad speaks to his mom. It starts when he hears how I speak about other women. It starts when he watches how disagreements unfold and are handled in our home. And it starts in the subtle things, like whether I interrupt him constantly or whether I show him what it looks like to truly listen. And it starts in whether he sees emotional labor acknowledged. It starts whether he sees that no is respected immediately in play and conversation and everything. Because I don't want to just raise a nice guy. He's already that. I want to raise a man who understands that power is not dominance, that leadership is not control, and that masculinity does not require the diminishing of anyone else. That being strong enough to protect someone also means being strong enough to examine yourself. And that begins in childhood. And then there's also this quiet fear that isn't talked about enough, which is the fear of getting it wrong. It's the pressure to parent perfectly in a time where everyone has an opinion, where every choice feels magnified, and where technology moves faster than we can keep up with it. Because we are raising children in a digital world that we didn't fully grow up in. A lot of us, if you're listening to this, you've probably experienced that turn of not having any technology to having your first phone, to having, access to the internet in a way that's that your parents didn't, and obviously where we're at now. They will encounter ideas, images, influences, and pressures that we can't fully predict. And they will see portrayals of women online that are distorted, sexualized, reduced, edited, filtered, monetized. And I think about that very often. And I think about how to teach him that women are not content, that they're not commodities, that they're not background noise, but human beings with interior lives just as complex as his. And that their boundaries are not challenges, and that their voices are not interruptions, that their bodies are not public property. And that conversation isn't one big talk. It'll be 1,000 small ones. And that's where the work really comes in. And I think about this often just naturally because I'm a mom, but also because I'm in that very industry where those betrayals come from. And sometimes I wonder, am I doing enough to set the foundation right now? Am I talking about the right things? Am I modeling the right things? Because really the truth is that we cannot control the world that they inherit. We cannot control fully the world that they inherit, but we can influence the values that they carry into it. And that, I feel like, is where our power is. It's not controlling outcomes, but it is shaping character. And sometimes motherhood has taught me that, it's not sometimes, it's always. Children are always watching you. They're not just listening to what we say. And in fact, sometimes they're not listening to what we say at all, but they are watching how we move through the world and how we treat strangers, how we treat and talk about people who are different from us, how we handle frustration, how we respond to fear. And if I want to raise my child, to have compassion, I have to model compassion. And if I want to raise a child who stands up for others, I have to demonstrate courage in my own life. If I want to raise a child who respects women, men, humanity as a whole, I have to speak about people with dignity when no one is applauding me for it or liking my post or liking my reel or watching things. It's not about view retention. It's about what actually happens in your day-to-day life. And it starts in those small moments. When we're eating, in the car, bath time, bedtime questions that come out of nowhere. And I think it's really easy because parenting is exhausting to kind of brush some of those off. But those are the little moments that matter. And sometimes it's as simple as teaching him to ask, are you okay if somebody falls? Or it's explaining that people live differently and that's not something to fear. It's sometimes correcting language gently. Sometimes it's admitting that mom doesn't have all the answers, but let's find out together. I think that's a big part of it too. And being a mom in uncertain times means being honest about the uncertainty. I don't think it does our kids, uh, lying about it doesn't do, help them at all. And I think there's an age appropriate answer to those questions. And that's really hard to find. Not pretending that we have it all figured out is important, because showing them how to sit in complexity without becoming cruel is something that a lot of us aren't good at. And if we want them to be good at it, we need to work on it ourselves. I think a lot about fear. Fear is very loud right now. It's easy to slip into it, fear about safety, about division, about the future. And I feel like every generation has that, but you don't really know what it feels like until you're in it. And I don't want to fear, or I don't want the fear to be the foundation of how I raise him. I want awareness. Yes, I want, preparedness, but not paranoia, because I think paranoia is dangerous and it can really, it can keep you in a box. It has a lot of effects that are negative. I don't want him growing up believing that the world is only dangerous, because community, kindness, resilience, those are very real things that are beautiful, and they're happening all the time. And those things are true at once. And the world can be fragile, but it is still filled with amazing people. And it's my job to show him both. And, there's this deeper layer to motherhood that I didn't fully understand before becoming one. I thought I did, but it's different when you're in it. When you have a child, your bravery changes. You're not brave because you're fearless. You're brave because you know somebody is watching, because someone is learning from you. Someone's future is being shaped by your own choices. Motherhood has made me more aware of my own integrity and, you know, essentially asking myself questions like, am I choosing comfort over courage because it's easy? Am I staying silent when something feels wrong? Am I reducing people to stereotypes or generalizations instead of seeing their humanity? Am I modeling defensiveness or curiosity? Am I keeping myself accountable? I can say all of these things, but am I actually doing it? Those questions are different when you realize that your child will one day form his own beliefs largely based on how you lived yours. And I just want to say I'm shaping all of this as his because I have a son. I know that this is very different for parents who have a girl. And I actually would really love to hear about that too, because obviously I'm speaking from my own experience, but parents of little girls are going to have a completely different experience of what they prioritize. And I think those are equally important. And so, I've been reflecting on a lot of this very deeply lately. We talk about raising children, but we don't always talk about how we were raised on a serious level. Um, what did we absorb without realizing it? What beliefs about women did we witness growing up? What dynamics did we normalize? Did we see our mothers respected? Did we see their labor valued? Did we witness them being spoken over? Did we see them exhausted and unacknowledged? Did we see healthy repair after conflict, or did we see silence or, submission? Because whether we like it or not, we carry our childhoods into our lives and into our parenting. And, sometimes it's unconsciously, sometimes it's in ways that surprise us. It's definitely not always negative. Motherhood has forced me to ask, what am I repeating? And what am I intentionally rewriting? And if I grew up seeing women overextend themselves, do I set boundaries now? If I grew up seeing conflict avoided, do I show my son what healthy disagreements look like? If I grew up seeing emotional suppression, do I encourage expression? Breaking cycles, it's not dynamic. It's dynamic. It's not dramatic. It's subtle. And again, it's in all of those little moments. And, I'm trying to choose pausing instead of reacting, because things like apologizing to your child immediately when you're wrong is a good thing. That immediate is wrong, or is immediately apologizing is right, but for the wrong reasons is obviously wrong. So, I think acknowledging that something wasn't okay and I'm sorry and I'm still learning too is great. And then having a deeper conversation afterwards, and having your kid understand that you are keeping yourself accountable and that it's something that they should do as well, small or big. That to me is creating healthy emotional growth for every party involved. That kind of humility teaches more than perfection ever could. And if you're listening and you're not a mom, I feel like there's still questions to ask yourself. Like, what did I learn about power growing up? What did I learn about gender roles? What did I learn about my own voice? What do I want, other people to learn differently? If you are, or if you're not a mother as well, you can ask, like, how did that shape me? What do I unconsciously carry? What do I want to keep? What do I want to release? Because someone shaped your understanding of respect. It might not be your parent, but it could be other things around you. And all of those are worth diving into, of love, of worth. We get to decide what we pass forward to strangers, to partners, to friends, to coworkers. It's not just about raising a kid. It's also about how we move through life and what we pass on. And I don't think that any of us, are going to be perfect at this. And, as a mom, I don't have the perfect formula for raising a child in times like this. But I do know that we can raise children who think critically. We can raise children who ask questions. We can raise children who value human dignity. And we can raise children who understand that strength and compassion can coexist. We can teach them that wanting, safety and comfort, uh, and believing in human rights are not opposing ideas. We can teach them about nuance, and that nuance is not weakness. We can teach them that being loud is not the same as being right. I can't say that enough. And maybe most importantly, we can teach them that caring is not something to apologize for. And I still look at him playing and I feel that ache. That doesn't go away. Um, but that instinct, and that, or I should say not, but that instinct to protect him is still very real. Um, but I can't let that, you know, I can't let that feeling make me shield him or try to shield him from reality forever. Because not only is that not possible, but it's not healthy. It's what I want to give him is the emotional tools to walk through life with steadiness. Um, to give him empathy as armor, to give him critical thinking as protection, to give him love as a compass. And motherhood in uncertain times, I don't think is about having certainty. Um, I think it's more about choosing who we are consistently in front of our kids. And I think trusting that those decisions, those daily choices, they add up. Um, Motherhood has not made me more afraid. It's made me more intentional. I think more aware, more committed to raising a human who understands that power should never come at the expense of compassion. And that strength without empathy isn't strength at all. And even though we can't control the world, we can influence people we send into it. And that matters. That really, really matters. And a lot of the questions that I have proposed in this, I have my own answers to, and maybe that's something that's important to go through. I mean, even just the what am I repeating? I think that because parents aren't perfect, there's, you know, we all have the intention of raising amazing kids. Um, And there will be something that I get wrong, some things, most likely lots of things that I get wrong. And when I think about my own childhood, I was so lucky in so many ways. Did my parents get some things wrong? Like I said, we all do, right? And so, constructively, what do I want to rewrite? What do I want to repeat? I want to repeat a lot of things. And then there's things that, yeah, that I want him to not have to worry about. And what's interesting, I think, about parenthood is that there's a lot of easy traps to fall into. When people say parenthood is hard, because I say that all the time, it's actually not necessarily true. I think parenthood can be easy, and that's dangerous. If parenthood is too easy, that means that you're always taking the easy way out, and that, I feel like, is detrimental to your kids. And I want to kind of explain what that means, because parenthood is always complicated. So I'm not talking about how to provide. I'm not talking about, the actual place that they live, or what they're wearing. I'm more so talking about, like, in those little moments, taking the easy way out looks like brushing things off, about saying no without an explanation, about isolating them. There's different ways to take the easy way out. And I think that it's always important to reevaluate what that looks like for you. Because it's not like you make the decision to take the hard way and then you're just good at it. It's an everyday, every moment, every circumstance choice. And that is not easy. If I grew up seeing conflict avoided, do I show my son what healthy disagreements look like? I mean, I was in a very unique situation, only child, working in Hollywood really young, being around a lot of different perspectives and people. And so much of that was beautiful and great. And I'm so thankful for it. But yeah, did I see conflicts and disagreements that weren't dealt with the right way? Absolutely, I did. And I want him to have a healthy perspective on that. In our house, we don't yell. We talk things out. And that's hard. And with a 5-year-old, it's hard in the way that, we have to speak to him at his level and what he can understand right now. And when he sees us disagree on something, I want him to see that we are respecting each other, and that our disagreements are things that are not necessarily roadblocks, but opportunities to grow. And that's hard. That immediate reaction is hard. Trying to not, let our emotions get the best of us is hard. And I think one of my greatest lessons as a mom, and I think I've said this before on my podcast, is that one of the hardest parts about raising a kid is not trying to perfect them. It's trying to regulate your own emotions. Which is basically everything that I'm talking about here. And that sucks when you've had a hard day, no sleep, things are going wrong, you're late, the list goes on. It's a really hard thing to do consistently. And it's okay to admit that to your kid, because whether that's them, not being able to share at the playground, or, I don't know, I'm trying to give an example here because it changes as they get older, but it's all about regulating your emotions and keeping yourself accountable. I don't want to go in circles here, but I think it's super healthy to ask yourself all of these questions, even if you have to go back and write them down. I really do want to hear what you think. Navigating as women, navigating through all of this as mothers, I want to know what you are consciously choosing to unlearn. So thank you for sitting with me today. I think it's important for us to sit with this and answer those hard questions, because I think, we really need strong mothers right now.